Okay, so hello everyone, our dear guests, our distinguished panel of speakers. Welcome to Bayer's Parallel Session 4.3, titled Innovative Governance Practices in the Public Sector. So to give a brief outline of our session first, in preparing the session, we followed the guidelines from the organizers, and we aim to maximize the time for discussions and Q&A time with the audience. That is why we start with a brief introduction of myself, our speakers, and of the session. And then we will have about an hour addressing the questions prepared beforehand, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A with you, the audience. You are all invited to share your thoughts and questions with us, either by using the chat here on the right-hand side. I see some of you are already active. Or using the Slido application. If time permits, our speakers will conclude the session with the concluding and closing remarks. So my name is Maja Čukušić. I work as an associate professor at University of Split. I'm the principal investigator of a project financed by Croatian Science Foundation, related to our today's topic, titled User Process Redesign and Information Systems Model in the case of Smart City Services. And I lead a group of 3 PhD students, 5 international researchers. Before joining academia, I worked in an international IT company, where as a business analyst, I was involved in the design and implementation of complex ICT solutions for local governments and regional government institutions. My research interests are in business intelligence and visualization tools connected to open data movement. And to add to this, I'm a part of a rather large team of over 100 colleagues that work on developing the long-term strategies for our host city today, City of Split, in charge of digital transformation vision. I'm delighted to welcome today our speakers, whom I will introduce now in alphabetical order. First of all, welcome Dr. Aleš Namosh. I think you can see him on, yeah, okay. He's a scientific policy officer at Joint Research Center Seville since February 2008. He has been working for the European Commission, DG RTD and DG Regio since 2004. He holds a PhD in natural sciences and had been previously working as a researcher in many countries. Since 2012, he works as an expert in fields of energy, smart cities, and engineering in Smart Specialization Platform on supporting the EU regions and member states, as well as macro regions in Europe and beyond in designing and implementing the smart specialization strategies. He has co-developed the RIS3 assessment wheel and has been involved in designing the S3 tools such as the RIS3, ESIF Viewer, and ESIF Energy tool, as well as the S3 platform's website. He's a team leader of the project dedicated to the smart specialization cooperation in the field of blue economy and of the project supporting the design of smart specialization in the enlargement countries. So involved for specialization strategies in Montenegro and the region. Hi, Aleš. So Dr. Desislava Koleva, she's a chief expert for projects and economic development in Gabrovo municipality in Bulgaria. She has over 26 years of experience in the public and private sectors, specifically in industrial management of a large company, and also in economic development, strategic planning in the public sector, with focus on regional development and smart specialization. Her doctoral degree is in the effectiveness of management of telecommunication services, and her 2 master's degrees are in engineering and industrial management. As a certified specialist in local economic development, she has developed and implemented many innovative projects funded by Interreg Europe, Horizon 2020, URBACT, and national programs in the field of innovation, energy efficiency, and public engagement. Hi, Desislava. Dr. Kaspar Richter is head of the Growth and Business Environment Unit at the Directorate General Structural Reform Support, DG Reform, of the European Commission. From 2013 to 2015, he worked on structural reforms in Greece at the Directorate General for Economic and Financial Affairs of the European Commission. Prior to that, Mr. Richter worked 13 years at the World Bank on Africa, Asia, and Europe. He holds a PhD and Master of Science in Economics from the London School of Economics and diplomas in Economics and Political Science from the Freie Universität Berlin. Hi, Mr. Richter. Hi. Renato Totic is the corporate account manager and head of Croatian telecom operations in Dubrovnik for the past 6 years, using telecom industry core resources, primarily network and data centers, and with an extensive network of ICT partners. He is developing a smart city framework as a powerful tool to create resilient cities in Croatia and in the region. Through his work and strong relationship with the academy, public and private sector, he is positioning Croatian telecom as a critical digital transformation enabler, connecting people, things, and processes. In doing so, he is one of the pioneers of corporate entrepreneurship in his organization, active in the community as a lecturer and panelist. Before his career in telecommunications, he was working with global distribution systems, and he was a director of a local newspaper. Again, hi Renato.
Hi.
A warm welcome to our distinguished speakers. As you can see, we have a great panel composed of both policy and research experts, but also representative from local and regional authorities and an expert from industry, working closely with the public sector, in this case in Croatia. I hope to engage all of you to provide your unique insights and perspectives. Before we start our discussion, to provide the context, I will briefly outline our topic by illustrating several challenges that the public sector faces today to confirm and slightly reposition the focus of our discussion. So, pressures for improving public sector performance result in new ways for demanding accountability for the stewardship of public resources, and of course require management and analytical skills to select and implement interventions at national, regional, and local municipal levels to achieve better outcomes for citizens and businesses. Structural reform processes are underway with many interventions that have influenced the efficiency of the public sector. We will first acknowledge several projects being implemented at the regional level, focusing on green and digital transition. In line with the digital transformation trends that contribute to institutional redesign and significantly affect the multiple dimensions of governance, we will also address the potential of the ICT-enabled innovation in the public sector. And if time permits, we will also talk about the role of public sector in the global crisis caused by COVID-19. I will start first with the questions for our speakers, but as I already mentioned, you are all invited to share your thoughts and questions either by using the chat or Slido. So, first of all, as I already mentioned, we will address structural reform processes that support green and digital transition. My first set of questions will be for Mr. Richter, because he's the one providing us the policy perspective to our topic at hand. So, Mr. Richter, we would like to hear from you related to the European Commission's Directorate General for Structural Reform Support that helps EU countries to design and carry out structural reforms. As a part of your mandate, you're supporting regions and member states to steer reforms. Could you tell us something about DG Reform and how DG Reform collaborates with regions and member states? And to continue to briefly present some of the technical support projects that DG Reform has implemented jointly with regions, focusing on interventions that support specifically, as already presented, green and digital transition, and thus strengthen public sector capacity. I will start a brief presentation.
Thanks a lot, Maya, for giving me the opportunity to, first of all, for inviting me to this fascinating panel and giving me an opportunity to share a bit with you what the European Commission does through DG Reform in terms of helping member states and regions in implementing reforms, and thereby also to promote the green and digital transitions. Next slide. So first of all, just to say a word on where I'm working at DG Reform, because DG Reform has a very special mandate. It has a mandate to build capacity in the public sectors of member states in order to design, develop, and implement reforms. We were actually established as a self-standing Directorate General on the 1st of January this year. Prior to that, we had a service, Structural Reform Support Service, which was integrated in the Secretary General of the European Commission. Now, what we do is to mobilize the right expertise to member states and regions in doing reforms. And we do this through a program that in the current multi-financial framework up to 2020 is called Structural Reform Support Program. And in the next MFF, 21-27, is an upgraded instrument which will be called the Technical Support Instrument. Now, this Technical Support Instrument is closely linked to the recovery plan for Europe in the sense that it provides an instrument for member states and regions in order to address the challenges around the recovery and the resilience. So it's an instrument through which member states and regions can get technical advice, expert advice, in order to tackle the challenges and the reforms that they have to meet in the current times. We actually, on this instrument, the Technical Support Instrument, we have reached agreement with the co-legislator of the Council and the European Parliament on the 23rd of October. The indicative volume of this instrument for the next 7-year period from 21-27 is 864 million, so about 150 million per year, which is an increase compared to what we had in the previous period, where we, in the last year of our previous program, for example, we had about 85 million. So essentially this technical support instrument has this recovery and resilience angle, gives member states and regions an opportunity to get expert advice on tackling their challenges. Next slide. Now I wanted just to highlight basically 5 important features that more or less describe how we support SDG reform regions and member states in this agenda. So first of all, what is really important is it's a voluntary instrument. So it's an instrument at the disposal of regions, member states, but nobody is obliged to use it. That's really important for us because we believe that you need the ownership of the regions and member states in pursuing a reform. That's a key success factor. Hence, the program itself is voluntary. Secondly, another feature of that program is that it's a single instrument that can essentially address all reform issues in terms of job creation, investment promotion, promotion of sustainable and smart growth, across the whole spectrum of government for administrative, institutional, structural reforms. So we can look at issues from a fiscal perspective, we can look at issues from a financial perspective, we can address issues on labor market, pensions, social areas, we can address issues from the point of view of competitiveness, we can look at issues from the sustainability angle, we can also look at governance and public administration, and we can of course do all this in a holistic, integrated fashion. So essentially it's a single instrument that's available to all ministries, our sectors of government, and available to national, regional, and local levels. And again, our key counterparts in member states is the public sector. Now, the instrument is also very flexible from another perspective because it allows us to support the full cycle of reforms. We can come in when a member state or a region is interested in preparing a reform, let's say in terms of formulating a strategy or doing a gap analysis in order to find out where it stands relative to other regions or member states. We can support reforms in their implementation stage, for example, through legislative advice or through advice on simplifying procedures and processes. And we can come in once a reform has been adopted and then ask whether it was actually successful, has achieved the intended results, or whether there needs to be a follow-up and next phase. So we cover the whole reform cycle, so to speak. And then when we do this, we actually really take care of making sure that every single intervention that we implement in regions and member states is really tailor-made, is fit for purpose. So there is no one size fits all, but for every request, every project that we select, we really make sure that we mobilize the right expertise, be it from the public sector, be it from other member states, be it from international organizations like the OECD or World Bank, or be it from the market, from private consultancies. And then we make sure that this advice is delivered in the best possible way to the member state and region through missions, through embedded experts, through workshops, and really drives the advice through the outputs and activities that the member states and the regions are looking for. So this tailor-made feature is really quite important. And then just the last feature to underline. So we have this budget, next period, probably something like 864 million. This is the budget that we can use in order to recruit, pay for the expert advice. Hence, that means member states and regions do not have to co-finance these technical support projects. And that has an important implication that essentially the recruitment, the procurement, the contracting of experts for these projects is done in-house by DG Reform, and member states and regions don't have to worry about procurement for that and the paperwork related. What we of course are looking for, however, is that strong commitment and engagement of regions and member states in order to make the project a success. Next slide. So here that gives you a snapshot of the about more than 1,000 projects that we had in the last 4 years or so. First of all, to note that we engaged in all EU member states, which initially there was a question mark whether this program would be interested for both countries that are at the frontier of issues as well as countries that are still trying to bridge the gap to the frontier on an issue. So we are very happy to say that we are engaged across the board, north, south, east, west. At the same time, if you look at it, of course, you see that there is a bit of a bias or a larger engagement that we have in countries that are still have to bridge that gap to the frontier and are still in the upward convergence process. This is essentially a reflection of two things. First of all, there is more interest in those regions and member states to engage with us. We see that in the terms of requests that we get. But also, of course, from our side, we do see that in those regions and member states, there is a greater need for our support. Hence, our engagement is more important in those regions. Next slide. Now, just to give you an idea about the issues that we are getting engaged on. So for us, a key priority is, of course, to support with this instrument EU priorities, be it priorities that are articulated through the economic governance process of the European Commission, such as the country report and the country-specific recommendation that the Commission issues every year, but also other Union priorities such as the digital and green transition. But we also have an opportunity to support regions and member states on any own initiatives that they see linked to important key regional or national strategies, to the extent that they are compatible with the EU framework. So in that sense, the program also is very flexible, but the bulk of our engagements relates really to issues where the regional and national agenda is overlapping and in sync, and promotes also EU priorities. Next slide. Now, just to say, we had, as mentioned, the technical support instrument was agreed by the co-legislator. Now, obviously, the final agreement and operationalization of this program will only happen once the multi-financial framework 21-27 is fully approved, to prepare to help member states and regions in the next year. And in this context, the priorities that we have presented to regions and member states is, of course, again, issues around priorities that have come up in the European semester process and through country-specific recommendations, especially linked, of course, also to the COVID pandemic and recovery issues around this. More broadly, of course, the issue of recovery and resilience, the plans that member states and regions are preparing, and any support that we could be providing in implementing those recovery and resilience plans is an important priority for us, as well as then, and often linked to this as well, issues around the green and digital transition. Next slide. Now, let me just briefly walk you through two examples of region-specific projects that we have implemented in the last few years. And the first example will be about the issue of the green transition. Next slide. Now, as you know, the European Commission has made a very big emphasis on the issue of the European Green Deal and the ambition to be, in 2050, the first carbon neutral continent of the world, and has presented in a European Green Deal, which is really now the growth strategy for the European Commission going forward. And this is obviously an important area of support for us. The European Green Deal covers a long list of sectors ranging from climate, energy, environment, to skills, research, innovation, greening public and private finances, as well as the issue of the just transition. And the example that I will be talking about relates to this issue of the just transition. Now, essentially, the point around the just transition is that, on the one hand, the need, in order to achieve this target of 2050 climate neutral Europe, it's very important to proceed in regions with the decarbonization of the economy and their industries. But it's clear that there are regions where there is a very strong dependency on carbon-intensive activities, and therefore it's really important that for those regions where there will be a need for a fundamental economic transformation, that there are resources available to address these challenges in order to make sure that, on the one hand, the regions succeed in the decarbonization process, but on the other hand, that this is done in a way that there is economic prosperity associated with this for businesses, as well as that workers are reskilled and upskilled and find good jobs. So this is really the agenda of the just transition mechanism that the Commission has proposed in January this year. Now, linked to this, as part of this Just Transition Fund, which is sort of the grand pillar of the Just Transition mechanism, the Commission has asked member states and regions to prepare so-called territorial just transition plans. And these territorial just transition plans are, on the one hand, laying out what's the national strategy for the transition to a climate neutral economy. And then for those regions that are really most affected of those transitions, first of all, those plans identify which are those regions in a member state. And then secondly, for those regions, they present the action plan, the roadmap, the concrete measures in order to, the strategy, so to speak, in order to achieve this goal of decarbonization while transforming the region economically and making sure that there are jobs and good jobs for the population. So these plans are very important because the regions will prepare these plans, and then in order to get access to the resources of the Just Transition Fund and Just Transition Mechanism, these plans have to be approved by the European Commission. So this is the proposal of the European Commission. The regulation on the Just Transition Fund is still under discussion with the co-legislator. Now, in order to support this effort, DG Reform went out with a dedicated call early this year. And there are 18 member states and asking member states whether they would be interested to receive support from DG Reform in preparing these plans. Now, 18 member states have come forward, and you see the names of the countries on the slide. Bulgaria, Belgium, Cyprus, Czechia, Greece, Spain, Finland, Croatia, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Sweden, and Slovakia. These 18 member states and regions we are now working with in order to help them prepare these plans. Two things to point out about how we do this. So first of all, we do this with as an input, in a sense, in an approach, in order to provide the member states and the regions to give the best evidence based on designing these plans. So the ultimate ownership of these plans, of course, remains with the regional and national authorities. It will ultimately be their responsibility to finalize the plan and then submit it to the Commission for approval. And the second point is that for us, in doing this work, there's a strong emphasis on involving local and regional stakeholders as part of the deliberations and the workshops that are going on in preparation of these plans. Now, I wanted to talk about one specific example, and that concerns the example of Slovakia. Next slide. So Slovakia is a country that where there is the region of Horná Nitra or Upper Nitra that historically has had an important activity of the production of coal and lignite coal in particular to be used for electricity production as well as district heating in Slovakia itself. Now, the Slovakian government requested support in 2017 from DG Reform in order to articulate an action plan that can provide the planning for Horná Nitra to, on the one hand, close the mines essentially in the region, as well as to ensure an economic transformation and ensure these opportunities for workers and rebuild the environment in the region. So we engaged with Upper Nitra in October 2018 up to July 2019 in order to, with the help of external consultants, in order to prepare this action plan for the transition from coal. We then subsequently also launched a project that is still ongoing. So the first project is closed. The next project is still ongoing. It's about addressing more the issues around the rehabilitation of mining land and the mining infrastructure. And then with the dedicated call that I spoke just about, we also support 3 other Slovakian regions, as well as Horná Nitra, on the preparation of these territorial just transition plans. Now, the outcome, there was an immediate outcome of this activity in the sense that in July 2019, the government endorsed the action plan that was prepared under this project as the transformation action plan of the coal region for Upper Nitra as an official strategy. And I should mention that as an initial input of this work, there was also an important contribution from JRC, who contributed a study for Horná Nitra, as well a broader initiative of the European Commission around coal regions in transition that also fed into this strategy. As well as in July 2019, the president of Slovakia announced that Slovakia will phase out of coal for electricity production by 2023. So there was a very concrete commitment and achievement where this project made a contribution. Now, this was the example, and again, to underline that in this project, what was very important was, again, the engagement of stakeholders, and in many ways, the action plan and the work of the consultants was really to validate, through an evidence-based approach, the inputs that came from local and regional stakeholders as part of this project. So this is the first example that I wanted to share with you. Next slide. Let me just move to another example, not related to the green transition, but the other transition that is a key priority for Europe, the digital transition. And here, I wanted briefly to talk to you about a project that we've been supporting in Belgium and the northern part of Belgium, namely Flanders, where we've collaborated with Flanders Investment and Trade. Now, Flanders Investment and Trade is a public agency. It's the regional trade and investment promotion agency of London. It has offices around the world. And of course, London itself is a very open economy where about 1/3 of the jobs depend on exports and trade. Now, the key priorities for FIT, for London Investment and Trade, are on the one hand, on the trade side, to really make it easier for Flemish firms based in London, to do business globally, abroad. And FIT does this through financial support, expert advice, as well as support on networking. The other priority is to help attract foreign investment into London, again, by providing tailored guidance to those companies that have investment projects in their pipeline and who want to establish business in Flanders. Now, FIT saw that in order to meet those two priorities in a very high-profile market with global exposures for business around the world, and in view of the fast changes and developments on the digital side, in order to really stay competitive and provide good services for their customers, that they needed a framework for artificial intelligence. And so in 2018, they contacted DG Reform in order to become a more data-driven organization. So again, we worked with external consultants, more or less on two issues. On the one hand, on a artificial intelligence maturity assessment of the organization, of FIT, looking at data, IT systems, business processes, and staff and people. And on the other hand, then, to come up with scenarios and concrete proposals on how FIT can strengthen capacity to design and plan for the deployment of artificial intelligence in their work. Again, as part of this process, what was really important was to talk to the internal stakeholders, that is, through the executives of the company, to the managers, to the account officers, to administrative staff, to get their different perspectives, as well as, of course, to the external stakeholders that are working with FIT, in order to make sure that the strategy is rightly focused and can really be put up and running easily. So the outcome of this effort was that FIT essentially decided, based on this work, that artificial intelligence adoption is a strategic priority for the agency, and they're now implementing measures to, as proposed in the advice given through this project. So I leave it at that, and here just the last slide. If you wanted to find out more about what DG Reform does in regions of member states, you can go to our website, and there are various brochures that give you a flavor of projects and our activities around Europe and in different regions in order to support reforms in member states and regions, including on digital and green transitions. Thank you. Back to you, Maya.
Okay, thank you very much for providing us this interesting overview into support mechanisms that our local and regional public authorities can make good use of. Under governance and public administration, I have seen that you have also other examples as well on your website. And I see that there are already some questions for you in the chat. But perhaps we come back at the Q&A time for audience after to provide additional insights from our other speakers. So we'll get back to you. So this morning, in terms of smart specialization, it was a hot topic during the keynote speak and round panel that followed it. So we look here at smart specialization concept that has brought numerous insights into the governance practices in Europe. The experiences across Europe with the S3 process indicate that multi-level and participatory governance are demanding processes and often result in different problematic results, especially in Eastern Europe, where the governance is still rather weak on most levels. So one of the questions I see is already touching upon this even from Mr. Richter. How successful do you consider the efforts to assure the participatory governance in your countries and in the region? And I think by far the most knowledgeable expert on this topic is Mr. Namosh. So if you can please provide us with some insight related to success of the efforts to ensure participatory governance in the region in particular. Aleš, can you hear us? Okay, Aleš will be back, so he's having some technical difficulties. I know that, Ms. Kola, so this is how you have some experience with this as well, with smart specialization implementation. Do you, okay, so Aleš is back.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I seem to have some problems, but hopefully it will hold for the time of my presentation. Well, first of all, many thanks to the organizers and Maya for inviting me to this interesting panel. I'll tell you a few words about the process that we have been very closely involved all across Europe, which is the process of smart specialization of the design and implementation of the smart specialization strategies across Europe. In the period of 2014-2020, we had the JRC Smart Specialization Platform have, together with DG Regio, revised more than 120 smart specialization strategies, regional and national ones across Europe. And since the recent years, we have been also supporting actively the design of smart specialization strategies and the whole process in the enlargement and neighborhood countries.
Alish, can you perhaps repeat the last part because we haven't heard okay. So we will have to come back to Alish on this topic. In the meantime, as I was suggesting, maybe perhaps we can hear from experiences from Bulgaria in terms of ensuring participatory governance in your country.
Thank you for this opportunity, Maya. It's our pleasure to be part of this big conference, and I want to say thank you to Mr. Richter because the introduction was great. And when we talk about multi-level governance, it's quite important that at all the levels, the administration is quite familiar with the plan which is done by the European Commission. And I am proud to say that in my situation, Gabrovo, as a local municipality, was part of the research of S3 platform with JRC. And I saw that the other speaker is online, and Seville is a main pillar of smart specialization for the administrations and local governments. I want that I will give the floor back to the other speaker, because it will be important for us now to understand how they monitor the implementation of S3 strategies, and I will go back to you afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Many thanks for jumping in. I'm sorry for this. I don't know what's happening. So I'll try to continue where I stopped. So we have actually, the JRC developed a specific framework for enlargement and neighborhood cooperation, which is focusing on more like step-by-step approach on actually creating institutional capacity and then going step-by-step towards the finalized smart specialization strategy, and also continuing with the implementation. We have actually, with the specific work that we have had in with some regions that had certain initial problems with the smart specialization process during the 2014-2020 period, which are certain regions in Romania, in Bulgaria, in southern Italy, in Greece, in Portugal, in Spain, that later Croatia was also added. So specific processes we have been trying
Okay, I think that the same thing is repeating again.
Initial and universities and the companies, also the public, the broad public, so the society, participating actively in the creation of priority in prioritization, but also the multi-level governance, because you know that all the, member states, but also the other countries, they have various levels of governance, and it is very important that none of those levels are left behind in this process. But beside that, also a very important part of the smart specialization process is organization of so-called entrepreneur discovery process, which needs to assure the important involvement of companies as the creating stakeholders for the economic activities that actually bring wealth and to the region or to the country. But apart from that, also the policy mixes, which are very important as a part of the smart specialization implementation process, but also monitoring and evaluation, as Desislava mentioned. So, of course, currently we are preparing, the regions and member states are preparing their smart specialization strategies for the 2021-2027 multi-annual financial framework. And the addition in this round of smart specialization strategies is that they should be also kind of sustainable. So actually this S3, so smart specialization strategies, has been added with the sustainable flavor to actually assure the complements towards the Green Deal, towards digitalization, and also social resilience. So it actually fits very well with what my colleague said before. All the regions are currently involved heavily in this new preparation cycle, and it is very important that to know that actually we, as the Smart Specialization Platform, working together with DG Regio, but also with other DGs like DG Grow, like some other line policy DGs that are there to actually help to facilitate this process. And the governance is actually, as I said, it was already in the previous financial perspective very tough nut to crack, precisely because of the institutional capacity problems. This has been more visible in the Eastern Europe because this kind of participatory governance processes have not been in place for decades before this smart specialization concept kicked in. While in some Western regions and economies, like actually even was mentioned by my colleague before, like in Flanders, in the Netherlands, in Sweden, in Germany, France, and so on, these practices of involving the companies in the policy making process and in the governance was more established, whereas in the Eastern Europe there were quite a lot of problems. So we have therefore also developed some specific projects also with regard with the cooperation with the European Parliament, but also with DG Regio, where we hands-on assessed and were involved very closely in the process in some regions, where we helped develop to the stakeholders and to the governance of these regions and countries the process that would facilitate the closer involvement of all the stakeholders in the process and assure some kind of sustainability of this. So to assure that the so-called entrepreneurial discovery process would be continuous, would actually result in new discovery fields, new discovery of new priorities that could later, be bring to the higher sustainability of the region as regards to the employment.
Okay, so it seems that Alish is still here, but maybe he comes back in a second or so. This is how we're planning on commenting on something as well from your point of view as so being at regional authority.
Yes.
So, okay, so maybe we continue now with
as it was mentioned, there was a very good collaboration between JRC and Bulgaria, and not only Bulgaria, but Romania and some regions from Italy, as I know, Puglia, and Portugal as well. And this collaboration brought the final results and conclusions based on that institutional capacity is quite important for smart specialization to be implemented, and multi-level governance is quite important. But as it was mentioned before, stakeholders' involvement is the key pillar of this success. And when we talk about smart specialization strategies, we can say that bottom-up approach and EDP process, entrepreneurial discovery process, and ambition of the local government to work with stakeholders proactively is the key issue. And when we speak about strategic planning and economic development, the most important thing is to have a clear view of your economic profile and to follow the trends. And this is the new era when we are now having the conference online, but this put the question how we can use the data in the future. And all local governments should know how to have a better view on the economy. And this is possible when we have geoinformation systems, when we have macroeconomic data of the region on the table, and to support multi-level governance and development of the smart specialization strategy with bottom-up approach, which means that the cities are the motors of economic development and smart specialization. And if we discover that there are new business actors on our scene, that means that we can show this picture to the national level and to the regional level, and that should be absolutely influencing the planning process of the national smart specialization strategies. As it was mentioned by Seville, it is clear that in Eastern Europe, the smart specialization strategy is developed centrally, and most of the local governments can have some inputs. What is new this year when the process started is that some of the biggest companies with high level of patents and intelligence and ICT and digital new technologies, they have been invited to work together with the Ministry of Economy for the development in their board for the new strategy. And what I want to mention here, which is very important, not just stakeholders' involvement, but increase of the capacity of stakeholders is a key issue, because companies, they are doing their operational management and they follow their profit goals. But they have to be in the community of business, and the local government is the main animator of this network. And we have to bring together the smart specialization planning also with the partnership with the universities and researchers. Because as we discovered at local level, companies don't know each other, and researchers who we have at place, they don't know that companies are seeking for this kind of innovations, and a digital platform was established, for example, in Gabrovo. The name is InnovaGap, which means that local players should be connected. And this is the future of Europe, which is approved by the situation now when we have online conference. But I want to see our colleague from Seville. Maybe he will add something to his presentation.
Many thanks. Well, I think that basically I managed to say the majority of things. I don't know exactly to which at which moment I was cut. I'm very sorry for this, but what happened was that last night there were very heavy floods here, very heavy rain here in surroundings, and it looks like it damaged somehow at least some of the connections. So that's why it's not very usual that this happens, but unfortunately, you know, this is the nature is still the main governor of the connections here. So no, many thanks for your comments. Definitely, I mean, we feel that we managed together with the regions and the member states create some kind of very close working relationship where we can co-create the processes and help in getting to establish the capacity needed for the process. But of course, you must realize that especially in the eastern part of Europe, you know, with regard to these processes, the countries and regions are quite behind of the processes in the Western Europe. So it takes time. You can simply not advance. You know, you can speed up the process, but you cannot just deny the decades of this kind of participatory governance that has been nurtured for decades in the West, but is rather new for the Eastern Europe. Thank you.
Can I add something here? I know that it's true that Eastern Europe should run faster than Western Europe, but it's important to say that companies and business is doing so fast that there is no such a big distance between Eastern and Western Europe, which means that if we rely on the business approach and business models and implement them in the public administration and public sector, then this difference could be overcome. And this is the way how we have to think for the future based on public-private partnerships and implementing business models in, for example, in financial engineering of our projects, never mind if they are infrastructural projects, but also everything connected to education, everything connected to skills and development of skilled personnel and knowledge of needs of companies, which means that we have to be administrations which are business driven, and we have to have this good connection all together in all Europe, never mind the location of our administration. I mean, multi-level governance together with the Commission and DG Regio and JRC could be very efficient, thanks to the experience we have already from the previous planning period.
Really well so all three of you emphasize the citizen participation and citizen involvement in all the reform processes, so stakeholder engagement, in particular citizens. This connects well to customer-oriented strategies from the business, and also you mentioned some transfer from business models to the public. So for this, I would kindly ask our colleague, Mr. Totic, who is in the field, doing the work that you have said, educating and raising awareness, transferring business models from the sector, and doing the work in terms of putting citizens in the focus, to focus on their needs and build on their insights. We have mentioned also co-creation, co-design. Maybe it's time to mention also disruptive technologies. There was some mention about artificial intelligence, IoT, big data. So this is area that Mr. Totic deals with. Maybe you can tell us something about the reports from the field. How mainstreamed are these throughout the entire ecosystem of public sector actors? We have mentioned there is discrepancy in terms of Eastern Europe players, and so maybe you can shed some light on that from your perspective.
Hi, everyone. Thanks to organizer to invite me, and hello from business. Also, hello from Dubrovnik. It's a beautiful time, 22 degrees, and it's sunny, I have to tell you. So as a representative of main and number one telecom company in Croatia, I hope that our lines are good and that we all have a good connection here in Croatia. Excellent introductions for all three of you, especially Mrs. Koleva. Thank you for your opinion and for your observation of the situation. I would like to tell you what we, as a representative of private business sector, doing in order to make changes concerning smart specialization and digital transformation of public service. First of all, I would like to tell you that when we are talking about technology, we are all aware that technology tremendously changed the way of how we are living, how we are acting, how we are traveling, and so on. So, of course, as we can see, now we have a conference through the technology. So our lives are tremendously changed. As a private business sector, we are acting as a hub of people, hub of private sector. In that sense, I think about all private sector, because Croatian Telecom is trying to be some kind of motivator of all stakeholders who are involved in the process of digital transformation on society. So there is academic sector, there is public sector, I mean public government, and of course citizens, and whole private sector. We are acting as a hub. What does it mean? That means that we are trying to create a framework of partners, ICT partners, the best ICT solutions, and try to bottom-up approach to the public sector. It's very, very important today to make a difference between smart cities and which I should say we should think when we are approaching to the city, when we are approaching to the field, we have to be aware that there is a lack of knowledge, a lack of understand how to use data, how to understand the possibility of data and how to approach to changes. So there is a big problem with maturity of our cities, especially if we are aware that they don't understand completely material of conducting with the cities. So what we are doing, the main principle of our work is co-creation with cities, co-creation with regions. So we are trying to be involved bottom up and to offer our solution, our product, and to be and work together with cities to be one, I should say, compact game changer. I should say. So that is the mainstream of our work. So we are aware of that, and we are doing in that direction.
So your solutions probably help public authorities to become more evident, to decide based on evidence and allow them performance measurement and similar. So at the same time, there are requirements for the monitoring and evaluation of the smart specialization strategies, as we have already touched upon. So the challenges to get the data from the public authorities to track and measure the improvement and the effects of the strategies. The question remains, what are the necessary conditions and skills to sustain the digital transformation of the public sector in this regard, to become data-driven in particular? Also, how successful are we in devising mechanisms for measuring the success of smart city specialization strategies? This, I think, can actually be a question to Mr. Namosh and Ms. Kolega in particular. So how do you get the data, and how successful are we in measuring the success of smart strategies and smart specialization strategies in particular?
Can I
may
start?
start? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say that while I still have a connection, I wanted to say just a few words, but very briefly, if it's okay with you, Desislava.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Look, this is a very difficult situation, because the problem is that everything with regard to the evaluation and monitoring of smart specialization strategies takes time. So we have been systematically during the past years trying to evaluate the impact and the outcomes of the implementation for the various EU member states. The problem is that, firstly, the data should be, of course, uploaded by the member states and regions themselves into their websites and provided also to the European Commission. And they are basically not doing it each time. No? So to say, they are doing with the big delay. And also the information that they still provide at the end is not complete. Because also you need to follow basically even the investments that take time, that are only kind of paid once something is done, and so on. So it automatically brings in the year shift of 3 to 4 years. Nevertheless, we have been systematically working. A couple of colleagues are working on that, and we have also agreed with DG Regio that monitoring and evaluation should be one of the focuses of the current supporting work to DG Regio, and there have been already certain results, at least for some member states, which actually showed that indeed majority of the smart specialization related activities have been done in the way that the regions and countries promised. We are trying to also follow the entrepreneur discovery process across European regions and member states, and but we have noted that, for example, the most active, the regions and countries that are most active in actually updating systematically and pouring in the results from the entrepreneur discovery process are the Nordic countries, so and regions. So, for example, Finland, Sweden, Denmark to a certain extent, some German regions. They have been very active in actually, they have proven the continuation of the so-called entrepreneur discovery process, the automatic feed-in of the results into the cycle of smart specialization, whereas the rest of the countries and regions, they have been less active. There was also a problem that the European Commission, in a way, lost a bit of grip in the last part of the discussions over the past financial period over the smart specialization, because initially it was planned that around the midterm evaluation, the European Commission should actively revise the processes in all the member states and regions. However, at the end, this has been somehow diluted, so that in the final document, it was just said like that the regions should do that. So there was no leverage for the Commission to really insist to see the results of those evaluation, monitoring, feedback process of the for example, the renewed EDPs with some changes in the priorities of certain regions and so on. So that's a little bit of problem. But anyway, all these discoveries are fed into the process now, and we are planning to have a lot of events in the co-organization of Smart Specialization Platform, DG Regio, and actually even some regions where we will discuss this. We will peer review certain regions again when they want to be peer reviewed with regard to their processes. And this information is all very important. It's a bit less, how to say, we cannot impose it, but we are very happy to actually work with the regions that are willing to do it and learn from those that did this monitoring and innovation processes better than some others. Thank you.
I want to add something because I was part of this committee working with JRC for monitoring and evaluation of smart specialization strategies. And from my experience, meeting a lot of colleagues from all over Europe, we saw that the most important thing is not just to follow the national statistic data and the results from the implementation of innovative projects supported by ERDF, but the most important thing is to, as I mentioned before, to start to create a new data platform for innovations in the regions, and each region can register these innovations, and you will have much more live information, and that will support monitoring. I will give you an example from North Pas-de-Calais, where the colleagues from Lille, they had created Astrid. This is a great tool which you can see how many new registered patents and kind of picture for the region, the picture of innovations. And talking about data, as I mentioned before, geoinformation systems are quite important. Each municipality and each region should have this data, but they should be in a database which is connected to the territory, where you can follow all the expansions and recruitments of new investments, and where you can put on the map also the innovative companies and bring together the researchers all over the Europe to see this picture. And this is a very important but strategic dream of local authorities. I know that there is big difference between each municipality, but I think that local economic development in this period becomes more and more important, also for the implementation of the Green Deal, also for the implementation of the recovery plan, because we are talking about job creation, we are talking about skills, but the people are still in the center, and they have to know how to work with data. And this is the capacity which we need to increase in the municipalities, local authorities, regional authorities, to equalize the level of knowledge of all the players. And I think that ICT sector and mobile operators, I will give you another example with this initiative, Wi-Fi for EU, which was great. The European Commission put a lot of free Wi-Fi services in public spaces of Europe, and that should continue, because citizens at the end are the last consumers of our efforts, and the monitoring and evaluation can be done through them. So if we have a good connection with all this technical support provided by the experts from the Commission through the ICT companies, coming to the level of municipal authorities on local level, that will be great, and digital transformation could happen by this way. Use the municipalities and local authorities as a hub, digital hub for innovations, because we discovered with JRC that there is a big gap, where there is a lack of intermediaries who are connecting and know better than the others what are the needs of companies, what are the needs of citizens, and what are the needs of the community as a whole. And this was done by us through creation of new regional innovation center, which was established last year. But this is just to enlarge the portfolio of services and to digitalize the community. And it's not just to follow the trends in companies and to try to be main important player in EDP, but also to support the municipality with external expertise, recruiting talents and people, experts from ICT sector, to digitalize the community, to support the Green Deal in the community, which means that, of course, we are following and we are supporting all the initiatives which are coming from the Commission. We are working on multi-level governance in the country. We are very well connected with the regional and national government, but we have to be at place and we have to serve the companies and citizens.
Touched upon a topic that I also wanted to discuss. It seems that we were rather ambitious in setting the number of questions. So you have mentioned this, the need for data availability and tracking of management, ownership of innovation processes, empowerment of innovation actors, and in general, benchmarking the innovation in the public sector. So our chat is really active. So I would like to leave time to wrap up our discussion and to leave time for questions from the audience. So for Mr. Kaspar, Mr. Richter, how to motivate public authorities to ask for help for structural reforms? So how to motivate our politicians?
Thank you. No, it's an excellent question. I would say first, I mean, two things that help on this. First of all, obviously we're doing a lot of efforts in trying to explain our instrument in order to be sure that on the side of the public authority they have a good understanding about the tool, about the flexibility it offers. For example, about the fact, as mentioned, that it doesn't involve any procurement contracting on their side. But on the other hand, of course, to remind them, for us, their engagement, their ownership, their involvement is really, really critical. So on the one hand, it's really the explanation about who we are, what we do, and what's the offer that we have on the table for them. And then on the other side, what we've seen that works really well is actually when we start engaging with a counterpart, with the ministry, with the region, we have a first project, they get to know each other, we deliver on the plan, they see it's useful, and then the experience shows next year they will come back, they will have talked to their colleagues, and demand will increase. So it's a bit this iterative process of understanding the tool, of having an initial success story, as in Slovakia, for example, where we initiated one project, and in the meantime we've launched two related projects to it. That's a bit the road that we are traveling with member states and regions. But it remains true, of course. Ultimately, we are a proposition. We are there to help, but ultimately the decision rests, of course, with the region member states. Do they want to join that journey with us or not?
To continue, for you, another question as well. So apart from the quality of the project itself, are there any financial or technical requirements for the use of the support instrument? Are they targeted as the less developed EU countries? And according to your experience, has the corona crisis accelerated or slowed down the implementation of structural reforms? And what do you expect in the upcoming period? Pashko, these were three questions, not one.
Yes, okay. No, thanks a lot. Excellent points. Now, in terms of technical requirements, and financial requirements, again, to say that, so on the financial side, there are no real requirements because the financing comes from the budget that we have through our instrument. On the technical side, what we are mainly looking for is that there is a proposal on the table from the member state or the region where the problem is well articulated, where there's a clear expression of there's capacity and ownership from the region member state side to work with the experts to solve the problem, and that there's sort of a bit of an articulation of how the input that we would be providing through the project is then ultimately used to make a difference. Because we are really interested not in that report that ends up on a shelf, but we're interested to make a practical difference for citizens, businesses, public administration, and advance on these agendas of digital and green transition. So that's a bit the way we approach it. Now, when we look at requests, we do take into account also what are the needs. And so through that angle, we do tend to have more requests and more projects in countries that are still engaged on the cohesion and convergence agenda. Now this was two questions, I guess, and then linked to the issue around the Corona crisis. Well, I guess it's of course, first of all, really clear that the Corona crisis is a very fundamental crisis in the sense that it's a more deep economic and social shock than, for example, what we had on the financial crisis. So clearly, regions and member states are very busy in addressing, rightly so, of course, the immediate recovery challenges and the immediate challenge to restore the social fabric. So that's fully understandable, and that in itself is a very big, important reform agenda. But just to say that I think what is very important is to look at this crisis also as an opportunity, and I think this is the way that the EU leaders have approached it in July this year when they agreed on the recovery plan and the next generation EU as an instrument with this very big financial envelope. And the philosophy there really is to say, on the one hand, this gives resources to regions and member states to address the issues of the recovery, but it also gives resources to member states to step up investments, to close the infrastructure gap and really make a difference on digital and green transitions. So I think that is a very, very important agenda, and it's really an opportunity to address also the challenges of the future. And for this, I think, as Desislava has emphasized, the capacity at the local and regional level of public authorities to make good use of these resources and to engage with the private sector and to build that infrastructure is really, really critical. Just to give you one example, 40% of rural areas don't have the most basic form of high-speed broadband connection. Now, in such a context, it's very difficult to do homeschooling, homeworking. It's very difficult for local authorities to provide e-government services. So infrastructure investments on that dimension are very important as a basic condition also to advance the agenda around smart cities. So for that, the capacity of local authorities and regional authorities to manage these infrastructure projects is going to be a key element. And for that, the capacity building and the reform element will be really important. Thank you.
I think that with that, you have answered another question also directed to you, related to particularly ICT-enabled innovation, used suggested as an example of best practice in the context of contributing to institutional redesign in low-developed economies. So you have mentioned capacity building of public authorities, as this is how as well. But as you said, prerequisite for everything is the infrastructure. So in that regard, if you still have to invest in infrastructure, but maybe you have other examples as well. For example, artificial intelligence you have mentioned, maybe something else in particular.
Well, maybe just to give another example on another key sector, which is really important for the well-being and prosperity around transport and mobility. Again, in cities and a bit related to the Corona crisis, we've seen that there's been quite a shift in terms of modes of transport away from cars. And again, there are digital solutions that provide an integrated platform for sort of intermodal mobility. So you can switch from your rented bicycle to public transport or share cars and so on. These are also very important. Again, supporting the digital transition as well as the green transition and ultimately really improve the livability of cities.
This connects well with our next question for Mr. Totic. Which smart city solutions are the most wanted by Croatian cities?
Yes, it's very hard to speak about solutions because each city, each region has different needs. So there is a big problem when we are just trying to define some particular solution. I should say there is no smart city solution. Each city has its own needs, and we have to adapt to those needs and co-create the products and the solution. Of course, we are trying to standardize our portfolio and so on, but sometimes it's very, very hard to fit in real needs of the city. So as a ICT industry, as a telecom, as a number one telecom company in Croatia, we are trying just with our infrastructure to be enabler of all digital transformation processes and create a framework to develop in co-creation with cities and regional authorities a real answer on those needs. So we can talk about smart parking, we can talk about smart transportation and so on, but we should be focused on infrastructure and then develop products and solutions in co-creation with cities and local authorities. I think that is the best answer on that question.
Okay, thank you. Then I think we have a question for Aleš, if he's with us. So there are good sectoral tools such as the PSF dedicated to R&I that could be useful also for design implementation of RRF actions in complementarity with the reform instruments. Can you explain what are you doing to ensure such complementarities?
Well, I think the PSF is actually not our instrument. It's a policy support facility that is provided by DG Research. But I'm not sure if there is actually also by the DG of Mr. Richter, if they have something in this regard. But what I can say is that measuring actually the success of the smart specialization and its support also to the digital and green transition. There is the role of the digital innovation hubs that should work in support and in collaboration with the smart specialization processes in line with the smart specialization priorities for a certain region or country. And it's very important also the involvement of the stakeholders from this region in the interregional and innovation cooperation. So in so-called thematic smart specialization partnerships that have been supported so far by the 3 thematic smart specialization platforms that were actually hosted at the JRC in our framework of the work of smart specialization platform, but also that is being introduced and replaced now by the new interregional innovation investment instrument that is coming in place with the 1st of January 2021. So all these mechanisms are actually helping supporting the implementation and collaboration, so to say, among the regions in the innovative aspects and actually helping in creating lasting collaboration links.
Okay, thank you, Aleš. Maybe we have time for brief closing remarks by all the speakers. So maybe future of innovation in the public sector, what you expect in short term, maybe Mr. Richter.
Thank you. No, I mean, maybe just to say that really it's with the next generation EU, the recovery plan, the regions have really an opportunity to address some of their challenges on green and digital. So for that, it's important to advance on investment, but it will need reforms alongside with it, and it will need the capacity at the local and regional level to implement these investments successfully. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Desislava?
Having in mind that we are expecting what will happen with DG reform and the recovery plan, and we are putting efforts for planning of the new programming period as municipalities. I fully agree with all the comments of the speakers, but I want to say that be connected with business and be driven by business models following the trends of digitalization and ICT solutions in smart cities. This is our future.
Thank you, Desislava. Mr. Totic, please, closing remarks.
Yes, so definitely as a representative of business sector, I should say that we will continuously support all changes in our society, and we will do our best, and we are doing our best to be game changer, to be part of co-creation policies with the cities, and that's our main role. So making to be a hub, business should be a hub of, as I said a few minutes ago, a hub of people, public service, academic sector, and private sector in order to bring changes and to help to adapt to new and to change generally mindset of our people, because it's a very, very important to change mindset to do something great. So it's not about technology, it's definitely about people.
Always about people, and always we push the same issue. So the mentality and the change with throughout. Mr. Ms. Aleš, please, closing remarks.
Yes, many thanks. Well, just to state that the Commission services, we are doing the best in our powers to support the reforms of public administration across Europe in order to raise the capacity at all the levels, so regional, national, supranational, macro-regional, for effective management of innovation activities and collaboration, and better kind of readiness of Europe and its regions and member states to participate actively and successfully in the global value chains. So many thanks.
Okay. I don't want to take up much of your time, so I want to first of all thank our speakers for your insights, your enthusiasm, and also to our active and attentive audience. A warm welcome and thanks for your participation. We've had 180 registered users for the session. So our rapporteur, Ivana, will try to capture the conclusions of our session, and I hope that our discussion can and will be of general practical value for our audience, at least by forwarding and informing our local and regional authorities for the free money and free support they could get from the central administration in Brussels. So thank you for your presentation of these instruments that, as I said, we can make sure our authorities hear about. Yeah. So see you all at the closing ceremony at 1 o'clock, right after the coffee break. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.